Turn to your neighbor and say, the truth will set you free.
The truth will set you free.
But turn to your other neighbor and say, can you really handle the truth?
Can you really handle the truth?
Oh man, and I see some of your faces like, I'm not sure. I kind of want the truth, but I don't know. It's always a pleasure to be in front of you all. I love coming to Atlanta. Atlanta honestly feels like my home away from home. And so when it came to planning the tour, I knew that I had to come here. It's so important. I believe that, what God is doing in this city is really unique and different. And I just feel like we're all aligned. So even though I live in LA, it's an awesome pleasure to be with you. So this True Tour has taken me on a massive journey with this book. Anybody already got your book, The Truth About Men? Anybody start reading it already? Yeah. Who's already had some aha moments? My brother. He said, I like the way you started it off.
George Clinton.
There it is. George Clinton, Atomic Dog. There it is, man. Why must I be like that? Why must I chase the cat? But one of the reasons why, I wanted to write this book is because I think what we're missing now in the culture is love. And I think that this area of love, learning how to love ourselves, if we can, especially as men, learn how to love, I believe that there's nothing we can't do, and I believe it truly is the solution to all of the challenges we're facing right now. And so I wanted to write a book. If you look at the dedication, the dedication is to love, because I believe that is what is missing. And when I really began to look at, why do we as men have such a hard time doing it? Some of y'all say, amen. Tell us the truth. Why? Because so often we don't have a model in the home, of what love looks like. A lot of times, truth be told, as men, we don't always love who looks back at us in the mirror. And so as a result, when we don't actually know how to love or haven't practiced love, sometimes it's hard to give love and receive it in the way that we should. So a lot of times when we aren't loving the way that we should, we give ourselves over to the thing that stands in the way of love. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And so this is why I wanted to write this book. This book is a manual on how to love, how to overcome our struggles, how to become the men we were called to be, and also give women information along the way. Now, amen. You're welcome. You're welcome. This is where you're welcome. Y'all can talk back to me. It's all good. Like I said, we're in Barnes & Noble Baptist tonight. When I was writing this book, it was a struggle. Because in order to tell the truth, I had to be transparent. And I had to look in the mirror. Now, I don't know about any of you all, but we don't like looking in the mirror. Right? It's like, I don't want to go deep. I don't want to have to be transparent about who I am, what I think, what I feel all the time. Sometimes, when you're an author and you're put in a position to be able to instruct people, I'll be honest with you, it's sometimes easier to just say, hey, do this, instead of saying, well, I got to do it too. But this book was one of those books that I can't encourage you to be truthful. I can't encourage you to be transparent if I'm not doing the same thing. So I believe without transparency, there can be no transformation. Mm-hmm. And in order for us to have transformation in our life, we have to start being honest. And this is one of the areas that is so hard to do, because there's a lot of truths that we don't want to face. Why are we afraid of the truth? Why? It hurts. Insecure. Uncomfortable. Difficult. Accountability. Pride. Yes, all of these things stand in the way of the truth. And what I have learned is that when we are not truthful, we find ourselves in a lifestyle of denial. And anything we deny, we empower to destroy us. So, even though it's hard to look at the truth, what I have found is that there's freedom in acknowledging what is, even if we don't like it. Just because we don't like the truth doesn't mean we should not know the truth. And so for myself, I had to go on this journey. And as I was writing this book, brother, I hope you can hear me. We love you, man. He hears us. He knows what's going on. And so to go on this journey, I really wanted to write a book, for men and women. Even though this is the truth about men, why this is so relevant to women is because I don't believe most women understand us as men. Can my brother say amen? Amen? When I say brothers, I don't mean just brothers of color. I mean every man. Can you say amen? All right. Now, see, I don't believe you can be successful with something you don't understand. So I wanted to write a book not only about what we as men have to do better, what we have to do to learn how to love. I also want to give women information, because here is the truth. For women, you're going to be dealing with some men that will not commit to love. You need to know that. And you need to have information to be able to determine and decipher who you are dealing with. So There you go. There's Dondre. That's my brother Dondre. She said a grown male or a grown man. There is a difference. By the way, I'm going to give a plug to my brother Dondre Whitfield. His book will be coming out soon, Male versus Man. Watch out. You know, we're all aligned doing this work. But what I have learned, what is so important, is that for us to be the men we are called to be, it's important to commit ourselves to this process of love. And sometimes the woman in our life can play a vital role. And I'll talk more about that. Why is it important for women to have information about men? Because if you're dealing with a man that chooses not to love, I don't want you to feel helpless. I don't want you to feel hopeless. There are some specific things that you can do in order to take your power back and take your authority back in the situation. Because sometimes we as men, okay, and I'm going to tell you all the truth, sometimes we as men, when we aren't committed to love, we can do some things, especially in a dating sense, to manipulate, to make it, you know, hazy, not really sure what's going on. And this book is about bringing what is done in the dark into the light. Amen. Hallelujah, somebody. Yes, you know, it's so funny. Before I even get into some further tips, I was yesterday at the store. I'm not going to tell y'all which store, because some people from that store might be here right now. And I was talking to two brothers, and they were like, man, you know, DeVon, we saw you on the Breakfast Club. Anybody see the Breakfast Club interview? Yeah. Right on. Anybody enjoy the Breakfast Club interview? Yeah, you know, so often when you go on that show, you have no idea what's going to happen. But you know what? Listen, it was so funny. Clyde, have some water, please. Yes. It was so funny that when Charlemagne paused in that moment and said, I'm like, okay, dude, okay, what you getting ready to say? And he was like, I agree. I was like, oh, we good. Thank you. So in that interview, I talked about the book, and then these guys in the store yesterday said, oh, we saw your Breakfast Club interview. I said, cool. They said, we're afraid of your book. I said, why are you so scared? Because we don't want to be convicted. Because we know, you know, that there's some things we probably have to do better, and we think your book's going to convict us. And I said, you know what? Don't be afraid. Anything you're afraid of, make it your to-do list. Oh, wow. Yes. There's a lot of fear in this room. I just felt it. Why are you so afraid? Turn to your neighbor and say, why are you so afraid? Turn to your other neighbor and say, there's no need to be afraid. On the other side of your fears, say to your neighbor, on the other side of your fears, is the life you've been waiting on and have been promised. So face your fears. Come on now, somebody's got to break through. So it was so fascinating that they said that, and I said, listen, whenever the book is time for you to find it, you're going to be in a situation where you're going to be like, oh, I need the book right now. So one of the reasons why I wanted to write the book, going back to, you know, why we're here, is because it's time to learn how to love. And this is one of the hardest things that we can do. And so to write the book, I had to look into my own heart, my own soul, and really identify, well, you know, what is really going on in my life? What has made it hard for me to learn how to love? And what was the process that I go through daily to put love first? And so what I did is in the introduction, for those of you that read the book and those that have not yet read the book, I talk about this idea in this moment in my life that really stimulated this quest for me to figure out how we as men can become the men we were called to be. And so I tell this story that, you know, my father died when I was 9 years old. He died of a heart attack when I was 36. Anybody else grow up in a fatherless home? Right? Okay, we're going to have a support group after this, all right? Okay. So my father died when I was 9 years old. He died of a heart attack when he was 36. And he left me and my older brother and my younger brother to be raised by my grandmother, her 7 sisters, and pretty much, you know, some other few family members. It really did take a village to raise us. And so, you know, the majority of my life, the memories I have of my father, you know, he was, for the most part, drunk. Almost every memory, there were very few sober memories. But what was fascinating is that my mother never talked bad about him. So our point of view of my father, even though he struggled, we always had a really positive idea and image of who he was. So it wasn't until my teenage years where that image began to get challenged a little bit. I was over one of my aunt's houses, and I saw this picture of my father sitting on a bed with my mother and another female family member. And guess what? My mother was upset. I could tell it in the picture. But my father and that female family member were smiling. And I immediately said, what's going on here? What's happening? Nobody wanted to tell me the truth. So I began to persist. Did anything go on with my father? What happened? Finally, someone in my family told me the truth. that my father had an affair on my mother with that particular female family member in the picture. And I was devastated. I was like, what? You mean to tell me that my father cheated on my mother? I said, well, if he cheated on my mother, is there any hope for me? You know, I began to ask the question, do all men cheat? Is this just the way it is? And the women in my family said, yes. 99% of all men cheat. I said, what are you talking about? They said, the sun's going to set, the sun's going to rise, and in between men cheat. I said, what do you mean? Anybody ever heard that? Or anybody ever been? I'm like, what is going on? So what I began to do was, as a teenager, have this quest. Is this true? First of all, do all men cheat? Second of all, if not all men cheat, why is it so pervasive within men? Why is it so hard for us to stay committed? Why is it so hard for us to honor who we say we are and do what we say we're going to do? This began my quest. And as I began to go down this quest, I began to realize, oh, got it. Here's why. Because as men, we are not taught self-control, discipline, and putting love first. As men, when we're raised, we're taught the more women, the better. Yeah, man, listen, I'm about to mess up somebody's day tonight so much. See, watch, here's what's going to happen. Somebody's either going to cancel a date, or somebody going to get so convicted you realize you don't mean the person you're going on a date with after this any good, and you're going to say, I'm sorry, I can't do it. Right? So if you really don't want the truth, then now's your time to leave. And we're about to get into some real truths. I see two brothers looking at each other like, are you sure you want to stay? Oh. So watch this. So as I began to look at this, I began to realize as men we're taught the more the better. The more women the better, the more sex the better, the more money the better, the more power the better, the more success the better, right? So the more we buy into this idea of manhood, the less men we become. Why? Because society says if you don't subscribe to those things, if you don't fit within the box that defines what it means to be a man, most of us growing up are met with some form of violence. Stop crying. Stop being a wimp. Stop being a sissy. What do you mean you only have one girlfriend? What's wrong with you? So what happens is as men, we get broken by this box. And for survival, we buy in to this idea of what it means to be a man, which is actually against the divine design for manhood. And this is where our struggle lives. Because when we go against the grain, we begin to feed something in us that leads to our destruction, that runs and ruins our life. I'm going to get to that in a minute. Let's talk about the divine design. So if we go back to the book of Genesis, I just want to take y'all back to church for a minute. So what's so fascinating to me is that so often in the culture, women are taught that there's something wrong with you if you don't have a man. That's right. Yeah. Right? And men are taught fear, commitment at all costs. Right. Run from it. Right? Some of y'all running right now. You can't run any longer. You get the truth tonight. So watch this. So when you go back to the divine design, God created Adam. He said it's not good for man to be alone. So what does he do? He puts Adam to sleep. He takes a rib, takes a part of Adam. He creates Eve. Okay, watch this. When Eve comes into the earth, you do not find any dialogue about her asking, where is Adam? But you do see Adam saying, now this is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. This is why a man will leave his mother and father and cleave to his wife. What does that tell us? Adam was the one that was incomplete without Eve. Eve came into the earth whole. Y'all like, what? Why is it so important? It doesn't mean that women don't need men. Doesn't mean that men don't need women. What I'm saying is that as we go down this journey of truth, we get back to the divine design to understand that so often as men, when we decide to commit, that's when we can figure out, and this mic isn't quite working, I'm going to keep talking the way I'm talking to her. That's when we begin to find out who we really are. I want to also say something. You probably want to go ahead and tweet this. I'm going to tell you in advance. Boys play, men commit. Boys play, men commit. Boys play, men commit. Why? Here she goes. Yeah, that's that grown man. I told you, we turn this into Barnes & Noble Baptist. Amen. Talk back to me. It's cool. So watch this. So understanding all this, when I was going on this quest to figure out, well, what's wrong? Why can't we stay committed? All of these things began to get revealed to me, and I began to look internally. And I began to say, hey, Lizzie, I began to say, hey, well, as a man, if I think that just because I'm committed to God, if I think that just because even when I was dating that I was waiting, that means I will not fall prey to the issues of manhood, you got another thing coming. So as a man, I began to realize that in men, there's two things, love and there's lust. Lust is a selfish impulse for personal, professional, financial, or sexual fulfillment by any means necessary, even if those means are detrimental. All right. So why do we have so many challenges in our culture right now? I believe it's because men have given themselves over to lust, not love. What is love? Love of themselves, love of God, love of the woman in their life, love of family, love of commitment. Love is selfless. It's sacrificial. Lust is selfish. It wants what it wants, however it wants it, whenever it wants it, no matter who it has to go over to get it. Lust is impulsive. I call lust in the book the dog. I call love the master. When we as men put love in control of lust, when we learn to master the dog within, we can become the men we are called to be and created to be. However, when we put lust as our number one priority, and that's more than just sex or women, it's power, it's money, it's success, it's excess.
That's right. Yeah.
When we want those things more than we want our commitments in life, those things will destroy us. Those actions will transform us into something we don't even recognize. So why is it so hard for men to stay committed? Because we have not been practicing love, we've been practicing lust.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right.
And when you are dating and you're in a situation where you give yourself over to lust so much and you have no discipline in this area, when you say I do, it's not a magical wand. She said that was in the book to wait. Taking you everywhere. Why is this so important? Because so often we are just living, but we are not actually working together. Because so often we don't have the information that can help us become more effective in our dealings with one another. So as men, and I'm going to talk to the ladies in a minute, as men, we have to look in the mirror and make a decision, what type of man do we want to be? The man that inflicts pain or the man that heals pain?
That's right.
What type of pain is that? And I'm not necessarily even referring to physical pain. I'm talking about emotional pain.
That's right.
Because a lot of men who are not going to ever raise their hand against a woman or ever do anything physical, sometimes still inflict emotional pain.
That's right.
How do we do that? By not being honest about our intentions. I told you, I'm messing up somebody's date tonight. It's happening. Not in a bad way, but in the best way. I want the truth to set you free. Amen. So sometimes as men, when we aren't honest about our intentions, what happens? We allow that lust in us to rule our decision making. Now, I'm not telling you about something that I wrote. I'm telling you about something that I did before Megan and I got married. Even though I was waiting for a good portion of my dating years, I wasn't the best dater. Why? Because there were times I wanted what I wanted, and I really wasn't even concerned about what the women I dated wanted. As a matter of fact, most of them didn't know about the other. Yo, we telling the truth. Y'all came to a truth talk. I'm not going to sit up here and lying to you. Okay? Is this too much? No. We can dial it back? No. Y'all want to keep going? Yeah. Okay, we'll keep going and we'll answer some questions in a minute. So, even though I was dating, I wasn't the best dater. Why? Because that lust in me, that dog in me, was running my decision making. Because whenever the dog would bark, I would have an impulse to want whoever I wanted at that particular time, irregardless of their feeling. So there were some I might date on Tuesday. There were others I might date on Thursday. There were others I was like, oh, that's Saturday night.
All right.
Well, we're going to get to that in a minute. I love it. She's like ahead of my, like, you know my script. She already get it. So why do I articulate this? Because what was happening is that because I was giving myself over to that lust, it was preventing me from loving. And if I have love, I cannot look at a woman as an object. I have to look at her as God's daughter.
Come on now. That's real.
And so not loving put a lens where I was viewing this particular woman and these women not as daughters, but as objects. Objects for my pleasure. How do you know if you are dealing with a man who's leading with love or lust? Does he want pleasure without accountability? Does he want what he wants whenever he wants it, regardless of what you want? For me, what I began to realize is that I'm not loving these women. I am fitting these women into my idea of what I want at the expense of their heart and ultimately their pain.
That's right.
Why? Because I'm not honest. I wasn't being honest. And it wasn't until I had this vision that I talk about in the book, which is I had this vision where I was at my wedding. And I was getting ready to get married and say I do. And the minister said, turn around. And I turned around, and down the aisle, there were all the women I dated, but the issue was they were cut open. They were slain. And it was as if God said right there, do you think it was worth all of them to get here? He said, don't play with my daughters.
All right.
He said, they're my daughters, they're not your objects.
That's right.
And that convicted me. Because I realized, wait, here I am, just buying into this false idea of manhood, letting the quote unquote dog within ruin and run my life, and then what do I have to show for it? And this is one of the things that why I'm so passionate about this message and why I believe that this message can change our culture. For this reason. For the men in the house, if you have all the sex you can have, if you have all the women you can have, at the end of our life, is it worth it? What do we have to show for it? All the money we spent, all the dates we went on, all the women we had, what do we have to show for it? Nothing. A trail of broken hearts, sometimes children that we weren't even intending, money that we could have spent towards our purpose, and then we say this is what real manhood is? This is why the culture is going in the direction, because we're doing the same thing, expecting a different result. We as men have to make the decision that it starts and stops with me. I will break the cycle of what is taking us in the wrong direction. Who am I talking to tonight? We can do it. But we gotta stop believing that these things that we've been buying into for generations are gonna work. They will not. So I, as a man, had to realize, okay, I've got to change. I've got to figure this out. So what did that mean? It meant I've got to start being honest about what my intentions are. Oh boy. Now this is what gets difficult sometimes. Because as a man, when you're honest about your intentions, that isn't always well received and it's hard to do it. But I had to start telling the women I was dating, hey, I don't think we should date. Why? Because my intention for you is not pure. And I don't see a long-term future for us, so I need to be honest with you. Yes, this is the type of honesty and truth that is going to help transform our culture. Now, for the women in the house, here's what's so important. Do not get caught in a gray area if you are single or dating. What does a gray area look like? It looks like you talk all the time, you text all the time, but you really aren't sure if you're together. Come on now. You may have met his parents. He may have met your parents. Y'all may go to church all the time. But never have you got to ask the question, are we committed? Are we monogamous? Are we exclusive? Are you seeing anybody else? When you don't know exactly where you are in an area of massive liability. Why? Because the one who has the information in your dating situation is the one who has the power. So I wrote this book to give you the power back. Because if you're in a gray area, you got to get out of it. How do you get out of it? By asking clear, direct questions and waiting for clear, direct responses. And if you don't understand his answer, ask him again. I didn't quite understand what you meant there. It's a yes or no. There is no maybe. It's not a multiple choice question. Are we exclusive? Are we not? Are you seeing anybody else or are you not? Because I need to know so I can make the decisions I want for my life. Here's also what's so important. To begin to identify the type of man you're dealing with. What are they committed to? Have you asked the question, where are you going? And what do you want out of life? Too often, especially in a dating sense, and I'm going to get to marriage in a minute, especially in a dating sense, we go with people where they want to go, not where we want to go. How many people have the Uber or Lyft app on your phone? All right. What happens when you use that app, right? You open up the app and what happens? You decide where you want to go. And after you decide where you want to go, when you leave this place, you get in the car, and the first thing you do is to check. Are you the car that I called? And are you going where I want you to go? What happens if you find yourself in the wrong car? You get out. When you are dating, you got to treat it just like Uber or Lyft. Are you the car that I prayed for? And are you going where I want you to go? Because if we want to go to different places, I'm getting out of this car. We ain't dating no, you get what I'm saying? Time is short. And sometimes we squander our time because we don't ask enough questions up front to even determine if this person is worthy of our airspace. Right? So important to identify, are you going the place that I want to go? What are your commitments? That way you can make a decision if this is the right person for you. And as men, we have to stop buying into this idea that more is better. It's not. It's not. Just isn't. I have found that when you commit to the one, that one brings something out of you that the many can never. Yeah, you can clap on that. That's a nice clap. And what is that? Love. So many people, when they hear about this book, they're like, oh, you're calling men dogs. I'm like, no, I'm not. I say in the introduction, men are not dogs at all. But I use this dog analogy to help understand how lust operates. But I said the real issue that we're not focusing on is love. How do we become masters? Mastery is love, the practice of love. What is love? It means I put others' needs before mine. I put the well-being of other people sometimes before my well-being. I love my family so much. I love my wife so much. I love my community so much that sometimes I'm going to live a life of sacrifice because what they need is sometimes more important than what I need. And when we as men begin to do that, there's nothing we cannot do in this world. But it's about mastery because we live in a culture that wants to foster lust. I don't have to tell you the music. I don't have to tell you the TV shows. Come on, I have to tell you the movies. We live in a culture that feeds the dog. This is why it's so important to feed the master. What does the master need? Virtue. What does the master need? It needs honesty. It needs transparency. It needs truth. And this is why I wrote this book, because so often we don't live in truth. Every man in here, whether you're going to say amen or not, struggles between love and lust. And the truth be told, every woman does too.
That's right.
Brother, you can say amen on that. You're like, yeah, that's right. It's the truth. But here's why I did not write this book about what women need to do better. Because I believe that the majority of women are doing their work, and I believe you're already doing what you need to do.
That's right.
So I do touch on this book a little bit about the lust in women, but I primarily focus on us as men because I believe we're the ones that need to do the work.
That's right.
And we're the ones that need to honor our commitments, and we're the ones that really need to learn how to love. So in a marriage sense, I'll talk about this and then we'll take some questions and we'll sign books and all that good stuff, take pictures. In a marriage sense, it's so important. How many people are here are married? Amen. This girl, she said, I ain't close. It's all right. You're closer than you think. See, stop speaking that. You don't even know. You don't even know who's here. Somebody, you don't even realize. You might step out this place and bam, there's your husband waiting for you. Come on, somebody, give it up. Come on, we're not going to speak death over here. Speaking of which, I'll give you a commercial break. We'll come right back to our regular scheduled program. My next movie is called Breakthrough. Anybody heard of the movie yet? Yeah, saw the trailer? We just hit 100 million views on this trailer. What is the story? Because I want to talk about speaking life, and we'll come right back to our regular scheduled program. This movie is a story I found years ago while I was promoting Miracles from Heaven, which is another film that I produced. Amen. You like that? Well, you're going to love Breakthrough. I guarantee it. Here's the story. A 14-year-old boy, John Smith, falls through a frozen lake. The interesting thing about John Smith is he was adopted when he was 6 months old from Guatemala. He was raised in a predominantly white environment in the suburbs of St. Louis, and as he got older, he always questioned why he wasn't wanted, why his birth mother did not want him. But his adopted mother, Joy, said, you are wanted, you are loved, you have a purpose, God put you with us. Like, I know your birth mother may have done what she did, but this is all God's divine purpose. He would hear her, but he would never really understand and feel deeply what she meant. Long story short, he's 14 years old, a little rebellious. He goes out on a frozen lake with his two friends. They fall through the ice. Next thing you know, the two friends are able to get out, but our son, our kid, John, he drowns, he dies. He's trapped underneath the ice for 15 minutes without oxygen. They bring him up. Once they rescue him, he is completely dead. They take him to the emergency room. They try to revive him for another 45 minutes. They can't do it. They go to Joyce, his mother, and say, you know, if you want to say goodbye to your son, now's the time. We've done all that we can do. She goes into the emergency room. There's her son laid out dead. She says, I do not accept this. I don't believe that God would allow him to die this way. So instead of speaking death, she speaks life. Why is this so important? Because so often we allow what we see here to determine how we pray and what we believe. Do not speak death over something because you see it here. You have no idea what God may want to do, so you got to speak life even in the face of something that doesn't look like it's going to work. So she goes in that emergency room and she says, Holy Spirit, bring back my son right now. And guess what? His heart started beating again. The EKG machine started going on. Do you know that they were blown away? They airlifted him to another hospital. The doctor said, I heard what happened at that other hospital. But even if John recovers, he was without oxygen for 15 minutes. He's going to be a vegetable. And Joyce said, stop talking negative around my son. He can hear you. Now, mind you, he was in a coma. She said, 2, you're supposed to be the best. You do what you're supposed to do and you let God do the rest. And she said, 3, I guarantee you my son will get up and walk out of here. She brought the church to pray for John. She brought the basketball team to pray over John. She brought the cheerleaders to pray over John. She brought the pastors. The community came and prayed over John. Do you know, within 72 hours, John woke up out of that coma, and within 2 weeks, he walked out of that hospital. No brain damage, no lung damage, no eye damage, no evidence that he ever went through what he went through. But here's what was so powerful. When he realized it was the prayers of his mother and the prayers of the community, he said, now I know I have a purpose. Now I know I have a plan. And John Smith graduates high school this year and is going on to college. If his mother had called in, put in a towel, he'd be in a grave right now. But because she spoke life, he has life. Why is it so important? Stop speaking death over your situation. Turn to your neighbor and say, speak life. Speak life. Turn to the other neighbor and say, you got to speak life. Come on now. And if you can't speak life, don't say nothing. All right? I'm speaking life over your love life right now. I don't know who I'm talking about. I'm speaking life over. You think that thing is on life support? God's getting ready to resurrect your love life. Who am I talking to tonight? Come on now. I speak life. Come on now. You have no idea. Get ready for what God's going to do. Get ready. Anticipate. Some of you guys think, oh, well, I'm too old. Are you crazy? What you talking about? You too old. Do you realize that in reference to eternity, you are young? And you have no idea what God wants to do and who he wants to bring in your life. So all I can tell you is prepare and get ready and speak life. So back to our regular scheduled program. In a marriage sense, here's what's so important. Because every man struggles between love and lust, even when you're married. Marriage is not a magic wand that just makes the dog go to sleep. It doesn't work that way. I thought it did. And I was like, oh, Lord, when I figured out that the dog was still alive and well, I said, baby, help me. I didn't know. I thought I was going to put it to sleep. And it didn't. And when I began to realize, I have a whole chapter about this in the book called Create a Safe Space. As men, we have to have a safe space to talk, especially within a relationship. And here is the challenge. A lot of times, women will say, we want the truth. And then men will give them the truth. And they will be like, how could you? What's wrong with you? Let me tell you something. In a safe space, there are ground rules. One of the biggest ground rules is you cannot judge what somebody says. And sometimes, as a man, when we are vulnerable and we open up, and the woman in our life gets angry or mad at us and makes us feel less than, it may be the last time we open up. We have to have a safe space where we can talk without fear of judgment. Because there's a lot of things that are going on underneath the surface that we need to be able to talk about. And there's the safest place in the world to talk is with the person you are committed to do life with. I have a whole chapter in the book called Claim Your Territory. You have to safeguard your relationship. Relationships don't just protect themselves, right? So what's one of the things you got to do to protect your relationship? Make sure that in your relationship, you and your partner are the only ones meeting your emotional needs. So what does that mean for friendships? She said, none, that's not true. No, don't go there yet. Here's what it is. She said, no, you can't have no friends. If you with me, you better put all the friends down. Not true. But with friendships of the opposite sex, you have to be mindful that those friends are not meeting your emotional needs in a way that is detrimental to the relationship. Also, you have to be careful that you're not confiding things in friends of the opposite sex that you should be confiding with your partner. I'm talking to somebody right now. Why? Because you're claiming your territory. You are locking down your relationship. Here's another thing. You got to sometimes monitor social media. Why? Amen. Why? Because social media can be a relationship killer. Because you end up spending more time on the phone than you do talking to your partner. And then we wonder why things aren't great, because we are giving Instagram our time, Facebook our time, not our partner. So important to say, hey, you know what? Let's come to an agreement about how we use social media. When we first get home, maybe we take an hour, we're like, you know what? We're just going to plug into each other. Everyone has to have different rules on how you do it, but don't just think it's going to manage itself by itself. When we decide we're going to lead with love, we have to be proactive. We have to take the initiative. We have to sometimes do things that others say are crazy in order to protect what we know is valuable. Here's one of the other reasons why I wrote the book. Hope. It is possible. Please do not believe the headlines when you read the headlines and you say, and that's why I use this analogy to kind of turn this idea of men being dogs on its head, because we're not. And so I wanted to write this book to say we can love. We can become better. Here's how we do it. We are all in this together. And so often, everybody just wants to write men off. And I'm saying, no, I'm not going to write men off, but I am going to put in place a process for us as men to do our work. And here's how we do it. And here's the role that women play in it. Just 3 nights ago, I did a truth talk with Terry Crews and Rebecca Cruz. Anybody know Terry Crews, Rebecca Cruz? Give it up for them right now. We love them. And here's what was so powerful. And I'm going to read a section of the book, and then we're going to take some questions. Here's what was so powerful. Terry was very honest about them being married, and he had a pornography addiction. And it was something he had not revealed to Rebecca. And God revealed to Rebecca that something was wrong in the marriage. And Terry was on a film in New York, and this is all on the Truth Talk, so you can go watch it for yourself. It's going to be up on YouTube. So Terry was in New York, and Rebecca calls him and says, "What's going on?" And he's like, "What are you talking about?" I'm here to tell you, when you got a woman in your life that's connected to God, He will download some truth to her. Let me tell you, we as men, we can't run the truth, because the truth is going to find us out, okay? So Terry was like, "What are you talking about?" Long story short, in that conversation, as they talk about in the Truth Talk, he started to come clean with her about what was going on, and the fact that he also had an indiscretion and stepped out in the marriage. What was so powerful is Rebecca said, "Okay, great." She said, "I'm out." Now, when I'm listening to this, I'm like, whoa, this is crazy. I said, "Rebecca, you mean to tell me you said you were out?" She said, "Yes." She said, "Because sometimes, basically, men will not do what is right unless we take a hard stand."
That's right.
And I said, "Rebecca, you literally are in my book." Because what's so important is that sometimes, for the women in the house, love us enough to hold us accountable for our behavior. Love us enough to hold us responsible. And sometimes the only thing, and I wish this wasn't the truth, but it is, the only thing that sometimes can get us as men to do what we know we're supposed to do is your absence. Don't be afraid. Because here's what I know. So often, sometimes women come to me and they say, "Well, what if I say this and he leaves me?" I argue he probably would leave anyway. Any man that professes to love you, that doesn't want to be held accountable, I would argue that if he leaves you, there was a situation where he was going to use that as an excuse to go anyway. So it's better to hold him accountable for behavior you can't tolerate than to allow yourself to live a life less than just to be with him. I believe you can be loved and respected at the same time. You don't have to choose. Here's what's so important. I put all this in the book. And as Rebecca and Terry were talking about, Terry said that her absence and her saying, "Hey, you got to move out," is what prompted him to do the work. And now, he's gotten over those issues. They're closer than they've ever been. He's learned that just because he's a man, it's not a license for him to do whatever he wants. And now he is doing the work and a huge champion for us as men to do our work. Why is this so important? Because we can do it. We can. We can. There is no struggle that we face that is so overwhelming that we can't actually do it. But sometimes we got to have the steps and the tools on how to do it. That's why I wrote this book. I want to read 2 sections that are really important, and then answer some questions, and then we will, do some pictures and sign books and have a good time. How's your dating life tonight? Everybody okay? Some of y'all might need to scroll through your phone and send some text right now. Amen. So I'm going to read this section here, which is called Mastery in Dating. For those of you that have the book, I'm going to start at the bottom of page 107. And then I'm going to read the acceptance prayer for women, and then I'm going to read the Master's Pledge. You did? Amen. Keep reading it when you need it. Amen. All right. I'll read quickly. So this chapter is all about learning to love. Mastery is code for learning to love. And so this particular portion is how to bring love into dating, all right? Mastering dating. We're living in the boom of a hookup culture. Never before in the history of human society has it been easier to hook up with no strings attached. The advances in technology and the popularity of apps have proven to be a lucrative yet toxic combination. Apps like Casual X and Tinder, I'm not going to ask if any of you have them on your phone now. I'm not going to do that. Allow you to swipe until your heart is content, or until you find the right person who is also looking for a casual hang. According to Mashable, Tinder boasts 1.6 billion swipes a day. While turning dating into a game of swipes might be fun, I believe it's doing untold damage to both men and women. How? When the sole focus of dating becomes self-centered physical satisfaction with little to no emotional regard for the person from which the satisfaction is being derived, it creates this me-first mentality. This works against the construction of genuine connection and companionship, which is the foundation of healthy dating. The health and well-being of our society is directly linked to how we date. If we date better, then we marry better. If we marry better, then we parent better. If we parent better, then we family better. And a healthy family is the foundation of a healthy society. Yes. Here are some dangerous myths about men that work against healthy dating. Real men sleep with as many women as possible. Real men don't commit. Real men don't show their feelings. The opposite of each is true. Real men don't dominate, intimidate, or coerce women into becoming their sexual playthings. Real men regard women as people, not objects of sexual gratification. They understand that women may want to be seen as sexy, but that doesn't mean that they want to be treated as a sex object. You catch that? Yes. So it's okay. Women, there's nothing wrong with women being sexy. But that doesn't mean that that sexiness is code for how I want to sex. Right? He wants a woman, a real man, a master, wants a woman not for what she can do sexually, but for who she is mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. If anybody agrees with that, say amen. Barnes and Noble Baptist, come on now. Real men honor commitments and act with fidelity. Real men reveal their feelings, including weaknesses, doubts, and fears. If a man aspires to mastery, it must show up in his dating life. Y'all can snap on that. You can snap. All right, I want to go over actually to page 116, and this is create an environment for healing. This is in the mastery and marriage section of the book. Again, talking about learning how to love, okay? Create an environment for healing. By the time most women get to marriage, they've had to endure countless amounts of sexual, physical, emotional, and spiritual abuse at the hands of men. So marriage might be the first time in their life where they have the opportunity to heal from this abuse. It's important for husbands to be understanding and help create an environment in the marriage that can contribute to their wife's healing. One of the most effective ways to do this is through the power of service. So much of what we're taught about marriage is how the woman should serve the man. But a man's marriage will go to the next level, and healing can be fostered when men learn to serve their wives. Get to know her wants and needs, her likes and dislikes, her passions and pleasures. Then do everything in your power to serve those. The more a husband serves his wife, the more healing will take place. Why? Because many women have been taught love on a conditional basis. How many times have you heard the saying, the way to a man's heart is through his stomach? Anybody heard that before? Yes. Now, somebody said yes. Now we all laugh when we hear that. But what gets ingrained in a woman's psyche is, in order for me to have love, I must do. The doing is then perceived as a condition to the receiving of love. So when a wife is served and it's not conditional, it's a powerful way for a husband to set the tone and make the healing of his wife a priority. The master leads by love and service. You can snap on that. Second to last passage that I'll read, and then we'll take some questions. Page 88, the acceptance prayer for women. I posted this prayer on social media, Instagram, that's right, on Friday of last week. And I had no idea this prayer would go viral. This is the most reposted post I've ever posted in the history of social media. And it's amazing to me, you know, the women around the world that resonated with this. And what was fascinating is that there was one woman who wrote in my comments, when I saw this prayer, I was like, what does a man know about writing a prayer for women? And then she said, I began to pray it and it gave me chills. So sometimes, whether man or woman, God will give us things for the opposite sex. And I believe he gave me this prayer for you. So here's the acceptance prayer for women. Dear Lord, I accept that there are things I have had to endure that I may never understand. I ask you for healing emotionally, mentally, physically, and spiritually. Please give me comfort in the times when discomfort is the only feeling available to me. I accept that you have created me for greatness, and I commit myself to pursuing it each and every day. I accept that there are some men who cannot handle all you have created me to be.
That's right.
But I will no longer make myself smaller to fit into their limited view of who I am. I no longer accept any man who can't respect me. I no longer accept anyone who tries to make me feel inferior. I no longer accept feelings of insecurity or lack of self-worth. I accept the fullness of my calling and destiny. I accept the power of the woman you have created me to be. I will not live quietly. I will roar with the excellence and authority you have given me from this day forward. In the mighty name of Jesus, let the people say amen. 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 First of all, you guys, I just want to read this last section and we're done. And this is the Master's Pledge. This is the pledge to love, and this is written for the men. So as I read this, for the men that are sitting, as you commit to this pledge, I would ask you to stand. And for the men that are already standing, as you commit to this pledge, I would ask you to raise your hand. Here we go. This is the Master's Pledge. 128. 128. Here we go. Here's the Master's Pledge, and then we're going to sign and get out of here, okay? The Master's Pledge. I pledge not to blame women for my actions. Women are never at fault when I lose control of the dog. Nothing a woman wears, says, drinks, or does is an excuse for improper touching, remarks, or sexual behavior ever. I pledge to never harass a woman